A lot has changed at this Ford Motor plant in Rawsonville, Michigan since workers last clocked in back in March. On their first day back, they're being asked to wear face masks, practice social distancing, and take a number of other precautions against COVID-19.
We've been picking up the phone and we've been calling our workers and explaining what life is going to now be like when you come into work, because life is completely different than it was in March. And we all have to get used to that.
Being able to return to work is a relief for people who had mostly been confined to their homes during the government-mandated lockdown.
I think people have adjusted real well to it. Come in, put your mask on, put your glasses on or a face shield, get right to work. So
I feel more safer in here at work than I do going out in general public right now, and I'm ready for it all to come back to the normal.
The big three car makers, Ford, General Motors and Fiat Chrysler, all reopened their factories on Monday. They called 835,000 employees back to work. Collectively, they contribute 4% of GDP, so the resumption of activity in the industry is expected to boost the US economy. But analysts say enhanced safety measures will slow down production. Demand for cars is also expected to sputter.
Demand will probably be impacted for the near term. So ultimately, it probably will work out okay, that there's maybe a reduced productivity in these plants because there's probably going to be some reduced demand as well. But over a longer period, it's going to be interesting to see how long it takes to maybe ramp these plants up to their full capacity, and more interestingly, how long before they need to be at full capacity on the demand side from consumers.
But with the Federal Reserve not expecting the economy to recover until the end of next year, the auto industry may be stuck in the slow lane for some time. Mobin Nasir, TRT World.
Well, for more on this, Jim Seiko joins us now from Loughborough in the UK. He's the head of the Loughborough University Centre for Automotive Management. Welcome back to the program, Jim. Now, Ford Motors Chief Operating Officer Jim Farley has described the auto industry as America's economic engine. Can you tell us just how crucial is the sector to the US economy?
Oh, it's massive. It's a massive employer. Obviously, that's a big factor, but it also it's the powerhouse of their economy, that they've historically been one of the major manufacturers of vehicles obviously in North America, but also the exporting of vehicles is a critical factor behind that as well.
Now, we've seen the companies really implement a whole raft of new social distancing measures, from the measuring of temperatures to spacing apart their workers, and things will undoubtedly be slow to start as they get used to these measures. But there's no real hurry for these automakers to be churning out cars off their production lines, is there? Because demand really has taken a hit during this pandemic.
I think that's true. I think that it's at two sort of levels. On one hand, they can't speed up very quickly because they have to get the supply chain in place. The Mercedes-Benz launched a production in Alabama in April, on April the 27th, but then had to close it almost immediately by the Friday because they couldn't get the parts. So they've got an issue anyway on the getting everything in place to actually then start to produce. But then at the other end, especially in places like the UK, car retailers are shut and they're closed until June the 1st. Now, there are certain requirements in the States as well about what is actually open and what can actually be where people can actually buy cars. So there is the logistics side coming in, there's the retail stores being open, but also then is, as you quite rightly say, the consumer demand has gone drained tremendously over the last few months, and people are not looking to get into long-term debt, taking out loans to buy new vehicles. So there's a real trend possibly to downsize, possibly to buy used. It's that sort of market forces that we're seeing across the world at the moment.
We know China is the world's largest auto market. Typically, that's where most of the world's demand comes from. But we also know that it was among the hardest hit from this pandemic, and they're only just starting to reopen. During the lockdowns that they had, demand really cratered. But do you expect demand in China, the world's largest market, to pick up again?
I think it will pick up, but it's going to be very gradual. And I think this is the real issue about what people are trying to make sense of. How quickly will these markets start to pick up? How quickly people will actually have confidence in actually buying vehicles or investing in something which is possibly the second largest purchase somebody makes in their lifetime. So you're looking at that and going, it's going to be slow. It's not going to be a quick boost. There will be, I think, there'll be a very much more to do with downsizing. There's going to be a greater demand for smaller cars because I think people are seeing that actually they want something that's cost effective that doesn't put them at risk, but also the environment and environmental issues are going to be an impact. In Europe, there is still this very strict EU regulations on emissions, and that will actually impact on some of the car manufacturers going forward as to whether they can produce cars that meet the emissions targets as well. So it's a multiple series of things that are interconnecting, which are actually making it very difficult for the motor manufacturers to really plan the scale of their operations going forward.
And you mentioned suppliers a bit before. Now, we know automakers are very reliant on what they produce in order to manufacture their vehicles, and not all of them are back up and running. So how much of a setback is the delay in suppliers reopening?
I think it's a massive one because, as I said before, the Alabama plant for Mercedes-Benz had to close because they just couldn't get the parts. And a lot of the manufacturing plants are built on a just-in-time basis. Now, that becomes a real problem if you've got a supplier who can't provide, that they've got a problem with supply, they can't get certain parts. Therefore, you can make maybe 7/8 of the car, but the last bit is missing. So therefore, you have to have a robust system in place which guarantees that for just-in-time production to continue.
Interesting. Jim Saker in Loughborough, thank you so much as always for your analysis.